Hi, everybody. Welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are tuning in from around the world. Thank you for your patience while we got connected. I'm Raabia Shafi, and I wanted to welcome you to Legit Leadership Live, episode 9, with the lovely, amazing, dear friend of mine and colleague, Denise Harris. So, Denise, welcome.
Thank you, Raabia. I am delighted to be with you today. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I am so thrilled. And just a note to our audience, thank you for joining us. And a quick reminder that this series, Legit Leadership Live, is something that we started to create a space for folks who are leaders in different fields across industries, who work with leaders, who coach leaders, to figure out how we can kind of get behind the scenes and learn more about what they're up to and how they see the world, so we can learn from them and broaden our horizons. So that's what we're going to be doing here today as well.
Awesome.
Lovely. So Denise, I am so excited to have you. I'd love to just share quickly how we met. So we know each other, I feel like over a year and a half now.
Yeah, that's right.
Quite literally the day the pandemic started, I think, is probably when we met. We know each other through the $1 Million Women community, founded by Julia Pimsleur, who's a mutual friend of both of ours, and connects awesome women together, business owners and like-minded professionals. So yeah, we know each other from there. And I know I'm going to dive in a moment, share a bit about your bio, and then we'll get into the questions. But could you tell the world who you are and what you're up to these days?
Yes, absolutely. Well, first of all, again, thank you for having me today, Raabia. But congratulations to you. I think you're doing some phenomenal things. I also love Legit Leadership Live. I've seen a number of the other interviews. And so thank you for all that you are doing and for creating this phenomenal platform for others.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, I work in the leadership development space. I'm a former corporate executive, but as of the last 6 years, I opened up my own leadership development and executive coaching organization. I work specifically with women who are looking to advance their career. I do a lot of work in the facilitation space. I'm also the founder of Elevated Leadership Academy. And I know we'll talk a little bit about that later, but that is sort of my space to bring professional women together who really are looking at, how do they create their own leadership identity? How do they pick up on insights that will help them to advance their career? And how do they define themselves as the types of leaders who they want to be?
I love that, Denise. And maybe, and just to kind of fill in a little bit of the blanks here, I'd love to share with our colleagues joining us that for more than 20 years, Denise has brought her contagious passion for growth and development to executive leaders and organizations, including big wigs like Amazon, Facebook, Cox Enterprises, Mozilla, GlaxoSmithKline, Bristol Myers Squibb, and Johnson & Johnson.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. And what a testament to your leadership as well. So that's pretty exciting.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I know, Denise, and maybe we can just dive in. I love this idea that one of your kind of signature moves is to help people identify and get unstuck from long-term patterns of behavior and thinking that don't really support their vision of success. And I know that's a big piece of your bio and who you are. Can you share a little bit about what that means? Like, can you kind of translate that for us?
Sure, absolutely. I think that every woman has a story to tell. Oftentimes they are in jobs that they don't like. They're not really feeling like they're fulfilled. They aren't necessarily leveraging their strengths. Sometimes you get into a position where you've just plateaued. And so what I like to tell women in particular is to stay curious, about the things that you enjoy doing and that you want to do more of. To really be open to what opportunities are available for you within your space, and to be vocal about that. Also just in terms of developing relationships and, creating space to do different things for yourself in terms of advancing your career.
I love
I think
that.
the one other thing that I would add on that too, Rabia, is, the idea of getting outside of your comfort zone. I think so many of us sort of figure out quickly what our zone of competency is, all the things that we do well, and we tend to just sort of stay there until something happens where we find like, you know what, this isn't as great as I thought it was, or I don't really feel like I'm growing or I'm advancing. And then that's the time when you really want to say, I'm outside of my comfort zone. Let me look and see, what are other opportunities, what's possible for me in terms of advancing my career.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to get into this in a little bit. And I want to just share with my audience that I know Denise is an expert in the world of women and leadership and career advancement. But Denise, we have folks tuning in who are representing all industries ranging from banking, healthcare,
Sure.
finance, nonprofits, all genders, men, women, and non-binary. Can you tell us why folks who are women and perhaps don't fit into that demographic should tune in today and kind of listen in on what we're sharing?
Well, I think we want to spend some time talking about what the future of leadership looks like, right? I think, the $1 million question becomes whether or not the skills that you've had in the past, the approach that leaders have taken in the past, is it working today, and will it work for the future? And so I think we're going to be discussing, the answer to that, which is no. And leadership is changing dramatically, right? And so I think we want to chat a little bit about how that's changing. And I think if you want to begin to start thinking about what is available for yourself in terms of how do you think differently, how do you redefine your goals, how do you identify your own strengths, and then align that with moving forward in terms of the experience that you take with you, the knowledge that you've earned so far, and create what your next is, or grow within the space that you are already in.
Absolutely. And I love that, because what you're touching upon is something so key that maybe we can elaborate on as well. Like, things are changing. What has served us or served organizations in the past is not necessarily what's applicable these days.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I just love is the coaching cohort that you have called Elevated Leadership,
Yeah.
with a key focus on understanding how leadership is evolving, in particular for women.
Mhm.
So I mean, I have to say, this future looking perspective, it's so essential, right?
Yeah.
In light of all the global changes, we don't even need to list them, but we know they're there. We know we're dealing with them. And I'm wondering, Denise, can you look into your crystal ball and maybe share with us what's on the horizon as it relates to leadership and change, and what do we need to look out for in the upcoming years?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, you did touch on this globalization, but it is important to understand now that we are working with, much more diverse teams than ever before, right? I have clients who have teams that are global, and so this idea of embracing diversity, right, and creating teams where people don't necessarily look like us or believe what we do, is important, because that's where we're moving. It's not just about what we're doing from a national perspective, but organizations now are having a much more global footprint. So embracing diversity, I think, is really a key component. I think the other piece is recognizing that we're dealing with a pandemic that is likely going to stay around for a while. And so that means that the workplace is changing significantly, right? And I think people now are feeling that not having the opportunity to work remotely is a no-go. And so organizations now have to change in order of offering the idea that you can work remotely, because that's becoming a key benefit to how people make decisions about the organizations that, in fact, they want to work with. And then finally, I will say, Raabia, that one of the things that I'm seeing that's pervasive, particularly, as women advance their own leadership, is looking at organizations now that sort of recognize that people are pursuing purpose and meaning in their work. I have a number of clients who have left their organizations to create their own opportunities, right? I have a woman who she was a CEO for a nonprofit. She now is developing her public speaking business. So that pursuit of purpose and meaning, because people have had so much time to sort of think about what they want and what is working for them and what's not working for them, become key. And so organizations have to be able to communicate a vision that allows others to understand how is it relevant to them.
For sure, for sure. And it's interesting to see the multi-layers of relevance where you have a multi-generational workforce,
Yes,
where, as we are all getting older too, like how do we maintain relevance as individuals, as teams, given technological changes, social justice issues that are, companies can't ignore anymore as just politics or things that are outside of their purview. So yeah, for sure. And I'm wondering, one of the reasons I not even I imagine, I know this about you, Denise, that you're an incredible coach and a resource to your clients is because of your own personal experience in corporate leadership. It's not your first rodeo. You've had time to kind of have boots on the ground and experience what it's like there. I'm wondering if you would be willing to tell us a little bit about your journey. Like, what are some of the trials and tribulations you faced, especially as a woman of color? And I also don't want to just pigeonhole you and me into that category, right? We're so much more than that. I'd love to know, what's it been like for you in corporate leadership? And then maybe we can shift to what did you decide, or how did you decide to shift gears to the entrepreneurial world?
Yeah, well, so my journey it's been long. I think I've been in corporate for over 25 years before I made a decision to open up my own business. I think some of the things that I noticed was, that a lot of women who were looking to advance their careers really did not have mentors within the organization. I think that oftentimes the CEOs of these organizations were men. And so when women were looking to, advance themselves, it was sort of the men that they were not necessarily being mentored by, but they were just sort of picking up those habits, and behaving sort of in the way that they saw these leaders behaving. And that always didn't necessarily work for everyone. And so I think for me, I found myself constantly creating my own path within the organizations that I worked in. And finally, I just got to a point where I decided that I wanted to do my own thing. I wanted to make my own decisions about how I spent my time. I felt like corporate was so structured that it didn't allow for me to be innovative or to just implement ideas or things that I wanted to do, because you were following the corporate mission, the corporate structure. And so I just got to a point where I said, hey, you know what, I'm ready to do my own thing. I had always wanted to get into this executive coaching arena. I'd always wanted to know more and do more in the leadership development space. And so it was something that I had been thinking about for a couple of years before I decided to pull the trigger and do it. And honestly, I will say that it's probably the very best decision I've made in my life. I'm 6 years into it now.
Congrats.
And every day I feel like I'm learning something new. Every day I feel like I'm excited to kind of dig in. And, I will say that it's not easy, right? I mean, being self-employed, being an entrepreneur is not the easiest choice to make. There's a lot of things that you have to sort of go through, but you learn so much about yourself, and particularly in terms of your level of resilience. I think there's that saying that you fall down 7 and get up 8. Right? Get up 8 times. And that's true. You're constantly picking yourself up and moving forward. But it's exciting, and there's a sense of freedom in it that I was at that time ready to embrace.
Yeah. And I'm thinking about when we met, Denise, we happened to be accountability buddies in our program with the $1 Million Women community.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking about goodness, like just like yourself, myself, and so many other business owners,
Mhm.
small and large and in between. I mean, that hit like a punch in the gut
Yeah,
last year. Like, no one was expecting the extent of it. We're still reeling from it.
yeah,
And just being able to have someone like you, like an accountability buddy, where let's check in every week. Like, how are you doing? I think,
yeah,
talk about like the need for a community. And that's the first time I've ever, like you said, the word embrace, like I've embraced or leaned into one.
yeah,
And yeah, resilience was the $1 million word, I
right.
think, for sure.
Absolutely. And I think, just the ability to thrive through change, because that's the world that we're living in now, right? I mean, the pace of change is rapid, right?
Right.
And if you can't sort of adjust and be willing to pivot, you find yourself struggling more than maybe you have to.
For sure. And in this world of adjusting and pivoting and navigating, it's, obviously not just for entrepreneurs, it's for leaders, it's for people, at the front lines. Like it's pretty much for everyone.
Mhm.
Think we're really tapping into this idea of mindset.
Yeah.
And I know you and I hang out in the mindset world quite a bit
Yes,
as
that's
coaches,
true. Yeah.
right? Like, and I mean, it's so funny, we know when we're talking to a coach because that's where the brain goes to
Right.
first.
Right.
It's such a foundational element. And I think as coaches, we all have a unique way of approaching mindset,
Mhm.
and also recognize how fundamental it is to build any other learnings on top of that.
Yeah.
And I would love to know, Denise, what, in your opinion, is kind of the essentials about mindset that we need to know? Why is it so integral to when it comes to legit leadership? And then what happens on the flip side when you don't have your your mindset in check?
Yeah. It's a good question. I think mindset is 80% of your success, right? And 20% is around the strategy. But here's the thing with mindset. It's the idea that you have found a way to kind of talk to yourself, right? And to dial down the negative talk, right? And turn up the idea that you believe in yourself and that you can do hard things, right? And that, fear isn't something that is going to stop you, right? The idea that, and I always say this, people who have heard me speak before, fear is something that you have to manage. It doesn't go away when you are thinking about doing big things.
Mhm.
Um, you know, I, I think the thing around mindset is that you have to be able to embrace the unknown. Like that's a key component. Embrace the unknown and really think about how do you accomplish your goals in different ways than how you were doing it before. And I would say that, perfectionism is always one of those things, Raabia, that stops people from doing big things, right? Like I got to be perfect at it, right?
Mhm.
I have to step out on my own. And the first time that I do an interview or the first time that I write a blog, it has to be perfect. And the
Yeah.
reality
Guilty.
is, you know,
Guilty.
to the point of what you were saying earlier, that's the part that sort of pulls us down when
Yeah.
we think that everything has to be perfect, because then we stop ourselves and we just don't do anything new because it's never good enough. So
Mhm.
I think, being able to have that mindset of allowing yourself to grow,
Mhm.
right? B, allowing yourself to be a beginner. When I first started in this world of being self-employed, um, I had to recognize I'm a beginner. I got to learn new things here. I got to stay curious, and I had
Mhm.
to let go of being a perfectionist and hoping that everything was perfect 100%, because it wasn't effective and it wasn't working for me. So I think if you can have that growth mindset, think big, allow yourself time to sort of get into these new things and to develop and to progress, that's probably the best path forward.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love what you're saying because one of the things I'm kind of into myth busting around mindset,
Mhm.
it's not like you said, you have to kind of manage the negative piece.
Right,
But we're not saying, yeah, swap it out with positive thinking. Like
right,
you're great, you're
right.
awesome. And there's this notion of toxic positivity, which drives me, the concept itself drives me nuts because I'm like, it's not just swapping it out. Like we're just like these robots who are like, oh, great, I'm cool. And then I'm going to be fine. Can you differentiate for us your take on positive thinking or just positive thoughts versus like actual mindset work?
Yeah. I think the mindset work is that you recognize that it's a practice. Again, that you are growing, that you're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. Keep going. There's a mindset around embracing long-term thinking, right? I mean, I think part of the pandemic is that everyone was focused on this short-term thinking. How am I going to work remotely? How am I going to talk to my boss? How am I going to, get childcare now that school is out? And everything was very focused on sort of the short term. But when you are looking at your career, when you're looking at advancing professionally and growing, that's a long-term mindset, meaning that it may not happen tomorrow, right? It may not happen next week, but that you're going to keep going. You're going to keep making progress. You're going to keep moving towards the goals that you have. And again, adapting that idea that it may take a while before you see the results or make the progress,
Mhm.
that you want.
Yeah,
The other side of the coin that you mentioned in terms of positive thinking, and listen, positive thinking is important. I mean,
totally.
I don't have any issues with that, because at the end of the day, I'm constantly telling myself, hey, keep going, you're okay. I mean, and sometimes you just have to relax and remind yourself that you're doing everything you can, and everything's going to be okay. And that's positive thinking, right? That you
Mhm.
realize, it's a new day. I'm going to get up. I'm going to start my day. Feeling good. I'm going to exercise. I'm going to work out. I'm going to eat well. I'm going to do the things that help me to be at my best and be strong, so that you have the resilience, the muscle to do the things that you want to do.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the things I mean, I totally love what you're saying in that differentiation. And I think the other piece is as coaches, and then also just generally speaking, it's okay to ask for help. Like
Ah,
we don't
good.
have
Yeah.
to do it all on our
Yes.
own.
Yes.
And I'm wondering your experience, because for me, when folks come to me about coaching, it's usually when they've reached a threshold, they're like, something has to shift.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily as proactive, where they're like, before it hits the fan, they're like, hey, I want to plan this out. But I'm wondering, what are some of the reasons or the times in people's careers where you get tapped to be like, hey, I need some help? Like what? Because I imagine some of ours are similar because we have overlap, but also maybe a little bit different. So
Yeah.
what's that like for you?
So oftentimes, it depends. I've had organizations that will reach out to me and say, hey, we have somebody who we are moving into the C-suite, and we need them to, step up quickly in terms of maybe the way that they're interacting with others, maybe the way that they are communicating with others. And so that's something that, I will work on with the leader, because now they're in a new role. And so what was working for them before isn't working in this new role. Another area is, and particularly today, when women in general find that the position that they're in is just no longer satisfying for them. And so they now have made a decision that they want to do something differently, right? Whether it is start their own business, or it could be that they decide that they want to change industries. That's a big one. And so they'll seek me out because they want that partnership in terms of challenging their thinking, right? Helping them to move forward with the things that they decided with these new goals. And also a level of accountability, which it's hard to hold ourselves accountable, right? I mean, you just talked about it. That's why we have these accountability partners. But accountability is also something that we really work on, within the coaching environment,
Totally.
as well. And then I've also been brought in when women become so overwhelmed and so burned out, and they can't recognize it for themselves. They
Mhm.
realize that something is going on, but they are having trouble sort of picking their head up and looking forward.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's because they're burned out, they're overwhelmed, they're working too much.
Yeah.
So just being able to sort of move away from that is a big deal because they've lost themselves in the work. And so
Mhm.
the idea now of, you know, how do I make some changes so that I can be better, I can perform better, I can be stronger, I can sort of appreciate who I am, and I can reduce this level of overwhelm and burnout because there are
Yeah.
different ways to do that. But it sounds simple, but it's not necessarily easy. And
Mhm.
that's part of the work as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I know that, I mean, burnout is, you look through your Instagram, you look through, LinkedIn articles and research and science-backed information on burnout and the need for organizations to be mindful of it. And also, I think people as individuals, we have a personal responsibility
Mhm.
to check ourselves, before it gets too much for us
Yeah.
to handle.
Absolutely. I wanted to just add that, you
Yeah.
know, that thing around burnout is important, right? And the idea of being overwhelmed. And, you know, I had a client who called me yesterday and she said, I'm taking a bike ride before I start my day. And it was like, wow, that's awesome. And, you know, she said,
Sounds
I
great.
scheduled it. You know, we talked about it before. So I scheduled
Mhm.
it. And so the fact that she scheduled this bike ride between 8 and 9 on a Monday morning
Mm.
allowed her to just do that, right?
Yeah.
It's not just about being intentional in terms of taking time for yourself, but it's about scheduling it. It's about, you know, making action around, you know, not always working, pulling yourself away from, you know, your laptop because the lines are so blurred now, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you don't leave. Before you had that maybe that 20-minute or hour-long car ride to sort of,
Mhm.
you know, decompress. And now we don't. We leave our offices, we go upstairs or
Yeah.
downstairs or whatever.
Yeah.
I do that, right? I may grab a bite to eat and then an hour later I'm right back in my office. I have
Yeah.
to be intentional about saying, hey, it's 6 o'clock, I'm done. What
Yeah.
else do I want to do? Right? Do I want to
Mhm.
join a running club, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you know, do I want to, you know, start writing? Like, do I want to be a part of, you know, learning a new instrument? But
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
those are some ways to sort of combat that level of stress and overwhelm that I think more women and of course men, everyone, you know, we're
Yeah.
also struggling a bit, but
Yeah.
are feeling today more so.
Absolutely. And it's interesting, Denise, as you're sharing that, because over the last few months, I have been speaking with clients, and there is such a deep connection that we can make between our worth and the amount of work we get done, like just being inextricably linked as an individual to our work. And that's kind of our contribution.
Yeah.
And in some ways, it gives us a dopamine hit. We're like, yeah, knock things off our to-do list. And
Yeah.
I feel good. I accomplished something.
Right.
And I'm just thinking it's something. I just had a light bulb moment go off as you were saying, like when speaking with clients, I'm like, well, what else is out there? And they're like, well, I don't know. But what a cool way to, sometimes you just have to shut it off to give yourself the brain space
Yes.
to think about what else you might want to, or what
Yes.
else that you're passionate about, maybe.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And you know, it's funny, Rabia, because I think sometimes people just feel like, you know, oh, what's my passion? You know, like they're going to find it underneath the sofa, and it doesn't work that way, right? I mean, I think it starts by pursuing the things that you are really interested in,
Yeah.
you know, and doing different things, right? Trying different things, and you know, again, allowing yourself some time to figure out, you know, how you want to align yourself with what's valuable, you know, for you and what your values are.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm wondering too, Denise, because on the note of career advancement, and I know we have lives outside of work as well that we're trying to, become a bigger part of. And but when it comes to career advancement, one of the big things that you really focus on is helping women get to that next rung in the ladder,
Yeah,
whatever it might be.
right.
And I'm wondering, for our audience out there, who are on the hunt for some sort of career change or leveling up in their roles and their titles, or even maybe they're just their responsibilities. Could you share with us any practical advice that can maybe guide them in their endeavors?
Yeah, sure. I think the first thing, Rabia, is to really identify what your strengths are, right? Really, lift that self-awareness of what you are good at. And I think the other thing too is to, look at how you are advancing your career. Like, for example, most people will start looking on all of the popular job sites for a new opportunity. But often what I say is once you can identify what your strengths are, then start thinking about what are the organizations that you want to be part of, right? I mean, not every organizational culture is going to be a good fit, but
Yeah.
start thinking about where you want to work. Like, start doing some research in organizations that you feel you want to work with.
Yeah.
And develop those relationships, keep those contacts warm, start talking to people. Maybe you might know someone who works in that organization. The thing with what's going on right now is that there's not a lot of getting together anymore at conferences and, different networking events and dinner parties. Like, all that stuff has sort of been dialed down.
Yeah.
So we have to be much more intentional now about developing those relationships, inviting somebody to have a quick Zoom chat, right? Sending someone a note and finding out how things are going, talking to others about, whether or not there are opportunities that are at their place of employment, and saying, hey, listen, I just want to let you know I'm looking for something different. And if something comes up in your organization, please feel free to reach out. Like, all of those things that I'm mentioning don't necessarily feel comfortable because it requires you to be proactive.
Yeah.
That's what I was talking about earlier, in that we have to find new ways of achieving the things that we want. And part of that is getting outside of our comfort zone, and connecting with others on a much more regular basis.
For sure. For sure. I know there's that quote there. I forgot what it is exactly, but it's like your life begins at the edge of your comfort zone.
Yeah, that's right. Right. Yeah. What is it? I think accomplishment is on the other side of fear. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, we're
Yeah.
quote mavens, but sometimes those quotes really do have a lot of meaning, and it's just all you need to kind of give you that extra nudge.
The nudge. Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting because I feel like over the last 18 months, and then continuing to move forward, what perhaps was uncomfortable or uncustomary before, and reaching out to people, like that's become so much more of a norm and so much more expected, or unsurprising, really. So I feel like maybe it's just generalization, but the global's working world's comfort zone has kind of expanded because we're dealing with this scenario that we just literally never have had to.
That's so true. And everybody is learning, right? I mean, that's the thing about this whole thing with the pandemic, is that everybody is experiencing it. And so it's kind of why we have to give ourselves some extra grace, and some extra compassion, because a lot of folks are struggling, and we don't necessarily know, what everyone's day is like. I mean, it's a benefit to work from home for some people, but not for everybody.
Not for everybody.
Right now, you've got young kids running around, and you don't have space in your home, right? I mean, so I think we have to sort of find ways to relate to the human side of work, and leaders, and have to begin to become much more empathetic about what people are experiencing, because we're so far outside of what we used to consider normal. And I don't know that we're ever going to get back to that. We have to now create the new normal.
Yeah, that's the kind of the new hashtag, right? The new normal. And no one really, I feel like we're kind of, we're inventing it as we go along. That's kind of where we're at.
So true.
Yeah. So Denise, I know one of the things, we're talking about practical skills for women who want to advance in their careers. And I love the tips you've shared. And also, as I had mentioned before, we have folks who are part of organizations across different, industries and demographics. And I really think, and I'm guessing you believe this as well, it takes a village to get from one place to the next, and none of us work in a vacuum.
Right.
When it comes to our organizations or our communities. So I would love to know, like, let's get really real here. What's the risk that we face in not supporting the advancement of women in these senior leadership roles in particular? And I would say leadership in general, but really looking at the senior levels. And then maybe we can talk about how those leaders and teams can actually be allies to women who are looking to take this leap. Like what happens if we just don't do it? You know, what's the incentive?
Well, good question. I think one of the biggest downfalls of not supporting women leaders within an organization is this idea that your organization isn't going to be considered top performing, right? You're not going to draw in the type of talent that you want, right? Because people now are looking for organizations that have diversity in the top levels. It's one thing to see diversity, whether it's race, whether it's age, sex, whatever. It's one thing to see that in sort of the mid-level, but are you seeing leadership, the individuals who are making decisions, who are setting policy? Like is that group, the C-suite, if you will, is that group diverse? I think talented employees, talented people are looking for organizations that offer that. And so when the organization doesn't, they may necessarily be limiting themselves in terms of how fast that organization is going to grow, how fast, they can create that type of environment for people to say, I want to work for that company, or you know what, I don't want to work for that company because I don't see anybody who looks like me, at these top levels. That I want to be able to go someplace where I can aspire to be that VP or to be that COO or whatever it may be. And I think the other downfall is in terms of clients, right? I mean, every organization wants to make revenue. Like that's the important thing, right? So do your consumers see you as a company that, does the things that they say that they're going to do? After we had the George Floyd killing, you had a lot of companies then that were saying, oh, we're going to be more diverse, right? We're going to focus on diversity, and inclusion and equality, diversity, equality, and inclusion. But now several months later, can you look at that organization and see that they've actually made some progress? Right? I mean, walking their talk, or was it something that they were staying in the moment?
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting because I'm thinking of, there have been a handful of clients or prospective clients, I would say, before we've decided to move forward with an engagement, who are like, who maybe someone else in the C-suite has brought me in, and then I'll meet with the person at the helm of the organization. They're like, Raabia, I've been successful my entire career without having to do this. Like, look at our numbers, look at this. Like, why would I even need to change? Right. And I'm like, you know what? That's a fair question. And I feel like if you're keeping up with the times and you're looking at sustainability, like what's gotten us here is no longer going to get us there. And you made such an important point. Like organizations are continuously looking to attract and retain talents and diversity, not just the performative or check the box version. Like that's a huge that is a huge element that folks are looking for to assess whether or not a company is a good fit for them.
Yeah. The world is changing. And organizations have to change with the world, right? They have to change with what people are looking for now and what people need. It's not just about the 9 to 5, because organizations now and work incorporate so much more of our lives these days.
Yeah. Totally. It's a big part of it. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Denise, I would love to know, before we kind of close in, first of all, I want to thank you so much for your time. I know it's a busy time for you and in your work. So thank you for making the space in your day to chat with us.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah. I would love to know, before we leave off today, as it relates to legit leadership, which I think you and I probably have a very shared definition of what that is in terms of how people show up and showing up in a way that people actually want to follow you. Whether it's advice or what's maybe like what are some words of wisdom you could offer to folks who are at any stage in their career to help them show up more as legit leaders, if that's in fact what they want to be doing?
Yeah, I think we've covered a lot of great ground this afternoon, Raabia, but I think probably if I could leave folks with anything, it really would be to allow yourself to think big, right? And not to be afraid of failure. I think that's the most important thing, is that there's a whole world out there, and think big, right? Give yourself time to follow the dreams and goals. Don't be afraid of failure.
Yeah. And I think you said something earlier too. It's cool to see this come full circle. One of the things you said at the beginning of our conversation was the fear doesn't go away as you continue to
Right.
pursue your bigger goals. It's going to be there. It's how you work with it, how you manage it.
So very true. So very true. What's the acronym for fear? I think it's false evidence appearing real.
Oh, okay. I've heard that. I love
it. Yeah.
That is so true. Oh, wow. Well, I think that's a great note to end on. Denise, thank you so much. I'm sending you a big hug.
Oh, right back at you.
Yeah, you're such a delight. And I really appreciate that our paths have crossed, and we're in each other's lives. So where can folks learn more about you and what you do, and how can they get in touch with you if they have more questions?
Absolutely. My website is deniseharrisonline.com. So you can always go there. And I'd love for folks to friend me on LinkedIn. And I'm also on Instagram at Denise Harris Online. So any of those portals, you can access me.
A huge thank you to Denise for joining us today. You can find her on LinkedIn. We have tagged her on all of our posts, deniseharrisonline.com. You can find her at her website. Please reach out to her with any questions. And I am such a big fan of always supporting women leaders, women of color leaders, and everybody else, and especially, just making sure that we lift one another up. So thank you for episode 9 today. And yeah, I don't know that Denise is coming back, but we love you, Denise. And thank you again. And we will see you soon. Stay tuned for episode 10 coming up in the next few weeks, and more to that in just a bit. Have a lovely rest of your day, your evening, your morning. And thank you again. And we'll see you soon. Bye.